In today's mini documentary, we will be covering the serial murderer known as the Doodler. He was active between January 1974 and September 1975 in San Francisco, California. He was given the name the Doodler because his MO was sketching his victims before brutally stabbing them to death. His real name is unknown and not much else has been discovered. I am your host, David Ajani, and on this episode of Unapprehended Serial Killers, we will be examining a famous mystery from the 1970s in San Francisco. The mystery is about a serial killer known as the Doodler. Although this case has never been solved, we will be going over facts to see if something has been overlooked. As you'll see in the following newscast, two victims of the Doodler survived the brutal attacks and were able to help police create a sketch of what we think the Doodler looked like. The description of the Doodler is as follows: African American male between the ages of 19 to 22 years old, a little under 6 feet tall, deep-set eyes, prominent nose, and thin body. There is not much known about the criminal profile, but he is believed to be a gay man with internalized homophobia.
These are two sketches of the man that for the past 48 years San Francisco police have called the Doodler. He frequented gay bars in the Castro and in the Polk Gulch, including this one, the Cinch Saloon. Still around today, and investigators say in the 70s, one of the Doodler's so-called hunting grounds.
Police in San Francisco are offering a $100,000 reward in the cold case of a killer who terrorized gay men in the 1970s. They've released an original sketch of the suspect known as the Doodler, along with another sketch showing what he may look like today. Police believe he stabbed at least 5 men to death. They're awaiting test results from DNA found at some crime scenes. The suspect was nicknamed the Doodler because he was reportedly doodling when he met a victim at a bar.
The Doodler's victims were all gay men who went to popular gay bars and were found with stab wounds. They were all sketched out prior to their murders. The Doodler's plan was to single out one man, sketch his picture from a distance, show him the sketch, strike up a conversation, lead him away from the bar to a secluded area, and then brutally stab his victim to death. And then he would leave them to be found the very next day.
He'd pick a guy somewhere at the bar. He's sitting at a table, he's sketching. He was a good artist. So then he'd walk up to the guy and say, "Hey, like my doodle?"
Kevin Fagan from the Chronicle told me that was the Doodler's pickup line and how police say he managed to lure and kill gay men.
What's your emergency?
I think there's a dead person on the beach.
Where exactly on the beach?
If you follow the street down to the water.
Okay, the police are on the way. While we wait, can you tell me exactly what happened?
I don't know. I was just walking alone and I thought I saw somebody and he wasn't moving. I didn't want to get too close. You never know what could happen, right? But I just, the first thing I thought was to call the police. He's not moving.
Okay, may I ask who I'm speaking with?
I don't think that's necessary. I just, he might need help, and I thought that it was my duty to report. Just come quick.
Detectives gave up the case in the 1970s after the doodler stopped killing and there were no new leads. But it has since been reopened in 2018. The investigation into the doodler now continues, and there is a $200,000 prize for anyone with an idea of who the doodler could be. But for now, we really don't know, and he could be anywhere.
The case has been reopened, the reward has been doubled, and police say they think they may have just found a sixth victim. I'm joined by Kevin Fagan. He is a reporter for the San Francisco Chronicle who has covered the case extensively. He also is the host of the podcast called The Doodler, all about this investigation. Thanks so much for being on, Kevin. This is such a fascinating turn to hear that there may be some movement in this now half-century-old case. I'm curious about this potential sixth victim, because as I understand it, the other victims were stabbed. This victim was beaten with a tree branch and a rock. Why do they think they're connected?
Well, the theory is that the doodler attacked Warren Andrews on a bluff overlooking the ocean in a place called Land's End. And Andrews got up and fought him, and the knife went flying over the cliff. So the doodler picked up the nearest weapons at hand, which was a rock and a tree branch, and he finished it off.
Wow. Then there's also this contention that 5, maybe 6 victims is actually really undercutting the true number. Some think it's as many as 14 victims. Why is that?
Well, as many as 17, actually, because you got to remember, this was the early mid-'70s when the gay rights movement was exploding in San Francisco. It was also illegal, essentially, to be gay. There were sodomy laws on the books, cross-dressing laws on the books, and a lot of horrible things were happening with gay men. They were getting beaten, more stabbings and shootings and beatings than I could count when I was doing clip searches. And some of the cops that I talked to back in the day said they'd come in and they couldn't solve them, and they'd shelve them. And they'd come in, they couldn't solve them, they'd shelve them. It was kind of off the hook. That was the time of the Zodiac killer, the Patty Hearst kidnapping, the zebra killings. It was a violent time, and gay men particularly took the brunt of that. It was a time of oppression. So the doodler found pretty good hunting grounds, actually.
Right, with so few people maybe caring to even, put the resources of the authorities on these cases. It's just sort of just so tragic to think of that.
As the newscast detailed, the doodler may have committed anywhere between 6 to 17 murders or more. All of his victims were believed to be gay men. Many of the surviving victims might not have reported to the police because gay men were being persecuted in the 1970s. There were 6 deceased victims who were identified by name and picture as seen here. Their names are as follows: Gerald Kavanaugh, Joseph Stevens, Klaus Kreisman, Warren Andrews, Harold Goldberg, and Fred Capin. The police found one suspect in the case, but it never went anywhere. The man that was identified, whose name and face were never revealed to the public, matched the doodler's description. The police brought him in for questioning. He had no arrest record or anything else to make him a suspect aside from how he looked. The police obtained a search warrant and searched his apartment, but they did not find anything to connect him to the murders. The 3 surviving victims identified the man as the doodler in the lineup, but they refused to testify. Even though the detectives to this day strongly believe he was the doodler, there is not enough evidence to try him in court, and so he was released. The doodler was never apprehended and is still out there living among us. This leads us to the ultimate question. Where is he now? What has he been doing for the past several decades? And is he going to strike again? Who knows? Be sure to join us on the next episode of Unapprehended Serial Killer. where in the next episode we will be covering the notorious serial killer Jack the Ripper.